Well, welcome to our podcast with the Root Cause Protocol. We're delighted, Stan and Eileen, that you could join us. And you are our premier guest. You're the very first people we've had a chance to talk with, so we're really looking forward to this.
We're
I'm really,
honored.
yeah, no, I feel the same way. How did you? What I really want to know is, what was your connection to farming? How did you want to express yourself through that critical function that is being lost daily across the world? But what was it that really captured your desire to be farm?
Well, I think we all came at it from different directions or from different approaches. Really was my first inkling was exposure to permaculture and seeing that wow, food does not have to destroy the environment. It doesn't have to make our bodies sick. And it doesn't have to be a choice of the least offensive thing on the shelf. It can be inspiring and it can be beautiful and it can be very good for the planet and it can and should be nourishing to our bodies. And so that was in college that I first came across that and was like, we should all be eating this way all the time. This should be what's normal and it's and common and it's just not. So it was an interest to get hands on from that point.
So we had some pretty robust raised garden beds going, just out of a desire to eat better. And it was fun to can and eat what you canned all winter and that kind of thing. And then my wife was in the medical field, and she kept seeing patients get sicker and sicker, and younger people having adult diseases with diabetes and obesity and so forth. So we thought we really should get in front of this, and I really was interested in a system where whatever my genetics were, I could give them the opportunity to express at their highest level, physically and mentally, for as long as possible. So we started small on 2 acres in a nice subdivision with animal rights. And we had our raised beds, and we had some pretty robust gardening going on, but we expanded out into proteins with 50 chickens. We were just at the farm store looking around. It was springtime. The chicks were all in their pens there. It was like, that could be exciting. Let's try it. So we brought home 50 chickens, and that went well. And pretty soon we had 5 sheep to add to that. And
Yeah, yeah.
that parlayed on. And then I think we'd all kind of had like clear from childhood, a dream of ranching or living out on sovereign on some acreage. And we moved from there into 120 acres and cows and a lot more chickens and
Added sheep.
sheep.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And then we bought another 80, and then we bought another 40. So we're 240 acres now, and we're handling 6 different animals.
Well, that's amazing. Um, I again, I approach it more from maybe an academic standpoint. I mean, I think there's probably this hidden farmer inside me. I probably would love to do it. It's just it's a lot of work. I think when I walked away from those 2 years is, I think a lot of people look down on farmers, and they shouldn't, because they're the most hardworking. There's no question it's hard work, but the organization it takes to run a farm and to do it well is incredible. The process of farming is very sophisticated, and the average person has no clue. They think that chicken McNuggets grow on trees or something. It's insane what people think. But I mean, I've read some fascinating books. Like, there's a famous book he was actually a biochemist. His name was Andre Voisin. You may or may not have heard of him, but he was legendary it was 1959. He published a book entitled Soil, Grass, Cancer. And his love wasn't biochemistry. His love was dairy farming. He loved to dairy. And he was able to prove biochemically that the lack of copper in his soil, he was in Normandy, France, but the lack of copper in his soil was causing lack of copper in the milk, was causing a lack of copper in his clients, which was what was causing cancer to grow in their body. And he did it meticulously as a scientist, but he was lamenting how farming had changed. And one of the most important parts of his book, you can get it online, but if you try to buy it, it's like $700. It's a one of these cult books. It's very revealing. But what he shows is that NPK, which was a residue from the First World War,
Yeah.
from munitions,
Yes.
was used in farming to, quote, improve the quality of the food, when in fact what it did was it prevented copper from getting into the root system. And he was able to prove that.
Yeah.
And it's just the real light bulb started going off for me when I realized this connection. Now, Eileen, you're talking about the permaculture. If you don't have the minerals and the microbes, you don't have life. And not a lot of people understand that very powerful connection between soil health and human health.
Yeah. Or that even if you do have the minerals, but you don't have the life, your plants
Right,
won't
right.
enjoy the minerals.
They
And
can't do it. That's right.
therefore your animals won't enjoy the minerals. Yeah.
And when one of my students, I have an online class. It's a 16-week course that teaches people how the body really works. It's like you can reduce medical school from 10 years to 16 weeks. One of the people who went through the program early on, he's a small grain farmer in Northern California, and he's award winning, and he focuses on barley and radishes. That's his specialty. And he wins awards year in and year out. And I said, what is your secret? How do you do this? He said, well, do you really want to know? I said, I wouldn't have asked you if I didn't want to know. He sprays the field with copper sulfate before he seeds it. That's all he does. He puts down copper sulfate. And what he's learned is that it's the copper to feed the microbes to ensure the Brix content of the food he's producing.
Nice.
It's not complicated, is it? But you got to know the dominoes that need to fall into place, and you got to know where to start the process, which is, I think, is key. It's really, really amazing.
Well, I'm sure we have a lot to learn. I really enjoyed your material, incidentally. I read clear through it, and I've actually ordered some of the supplements that you recommend and started them. So I really connected with it and enjoyed it. So thank you for that. But we realized quickly that it was all about microbial health. We were really microbe farmers. That was
Right.
it.
That very well said. That's exactly
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah. So our system uses no chemical fertilizers, no sprays, no insecticide, no inputs other than the animals.
Right.
It's
We're basically here to plug in to what Mother Nature already wants to do. And we're here to facilitate that and not be a barrier or an impediment to it.
yeah,
Do you let your animals poop on the ground?
We get excited when they do.
Oh, no.
and tromp what a lot of people would consider usable feed. We tromp it down and
Exactly.
introduce
Let
the
it
carbon. We,
fold
we
over.
leave a we leave a
Right.
lot behind us, and we run the math, and we're significantly carbon negative on our ranch.
Really?
Yeah,
That,
and that
that's really cool.
nets out having to move animals with vehicles and the animals, all that. You subtract all that out, and we sequester significant more carbon than we.
That is so cool. Is that true of farming in general, or that you're so committed to the process of regenerative farming that you have a different outcome?
It is regenerative farming
Right.
and being disciplined to that lets the system work. Eileen alluded to it. There's more microbes in a handful of soil than there is people on the earth. It is an alive, thriving, billion-year-old.
Wait again, please.
There's more microbes in a handful of soil than there is people on the earth. It's an alive, thriving, intelligent, billion-year-old life force. And Eileen alluded to it. Our job is to learn how. Nature gives free rides. We have to learn how to plug in and not disrupt it.
So, when we lived we were in Louisiana when we were on the farm, and as I teased my wife, it was 7 dog years in Louisiana. For 2 years on the farm and then 5 years in town. One of my clients, she was very switched on, but she had this picture of her grandson. She posted it on Facebook, and it was over. I guess he was like 3 years old. He was playing in the dirt, and he had this ring of mud. And she posts, "Well, there's my grandson working on his microbiome."
Yeah. Yeah.
but I've never heard the order of magnitude that you're talking about, that there's such a concentration of life in a handful of dirt. Because we have this belief that there's billions and billions and billions of microbes in our gut, when it sounds like, okay, maybe, but you could reduce it down to a handful of soil. That's amazing to think about.
It is pretty amazing. It really, it's powerful both directions. We have ground 5 years ago would finish well 50 cows, grass
Right?
fed, grass finished. That
Right?
same land 5, 6 years later will do 100 cows to the same quality.
Okay.
It's an impressive, it's impressive that nature will respond to the least sincere effort. It will step up and match you. It will do more than you expect every time to the
Totally
least
agree.
sincere effort.
Right. And I think it's true for our bodies as well. It doesn't take rocket science to bring balance back to our body. You just have to know which nutrients to add. Just as you know, as farmers, what are the key minerals? What are the key microbes that you've got to have? And as I understand it, again, I'm not a ranch hand, but it's the balance of yeast to bacteria that's changed. Is that right? I've heard that it's supposed to be what, six yeast to one bacteria, and now it's 1 to 1. And that's where the real breakdown is taking place in the. It's really, we should call it dirt. You have soil on your farm, but it should be called dirt on the average farm, particularly on a commercial farm. But are those numbers accurate with your experience?
I heard it broken down like that. That sounds very interesting. So I would like to follow up and look in on that.
Because
We
the
don't really
yeast,
know what the negative, like sort of the impact is. We haven't really thought about those numbers. Most of our efforts have been about how to cover more soil with either carbonaceous material like straw to encourage the plants to grow. And by doing that, it responds, more grass grows, therefore more cows can
yeah,
eat more grass, we can get more fertilizer, and it's this sort of recapitulating cycle that helps us regenerate and improve the health of the soil over time.
that's
Yeah, and
cool.
we pushed forward very diverse pastures with 9, 10, 11, 12 grass species and 15, 18% legumes that, some of it's early spring, some of it's late fall. The heat of the summer is the hardest one to find. But the
Sure.
idea is that at any time the animal takes a bite, there's one or two or three things in their prime. So they're always getting highly nutritious food.
And for as long as possible throughout the season, we've got plants that are alive and vibrant at their peak, exchanging with
Right.
those microbes the sugars that they create by converting sunlight into energy. They exude those through their roots and they feed the microbes. And in turn, the microbes will trade the grasses their minerals and their moisture so that the cycle will continue. And so it's this trade, this constant trade that's happening that we're facilitating with that diversity of species of grasses and legumes.
Yeah, the
So, so
microbes mine vitamins, minerals, nutrients, micronutrients from the soil, trade it to
right.
the plants for sugars for their community and what they need. And then it's in a bioavailable form for the animals and therefore us. So it comes down to the saying we've all heard that it matters what you eat eats.
And
Yeah.
so are the microbes the brains of the outfit? Are they the ones who really
Yes.
call the shots?
Yes.
Yeah. And we just don't
They
think
they
about
determine they determine the health of everything from there out. The plants, the animals, and the people.
it. Do the animals instinctively know whether the grass is healthy or not? Will they avoid certain grasses?
In a lush, see, our animals move every day. They're always
Okay.
on fresh grass. So in a well managed regenerative pasture, you get pretty even consumption. If you overgraze it or overstock it, they'll start being selective when it's towards after it's overgrazed and they still have to use it. They'll start getting selective and walk you back to weeds and monocrop.
So their bodies are still very much in touch with, if it tastes good, nature is signaling to the cows, it's if it tastes good, it's peak nutrition, it's time to take a bite. So they don't have preservatives and flavorings added to their grass or their hay. So their brain
No
hasn't been
feedback.
their brain hasn't been tricked by processed food for generations or decades rather. So they are very much in touch with this plant is going to give me the most nutrition out of all the plants in the field. This is my first bite of choice.
There's a famous study done with rats. So those are the four-legged rats. We are two-legged rats. That's how we differ from the rodents. But they've done studies where there's a surgical procedure you can do to turn an animal into a diabetic animal, and they do it all the time. And in this particular study, they created diabetic rats, and then they exposed them to sugar water. Very simple experiment. What did the rats do? They didn't drink the sugar water. What do humans do? What do the two-legged rats do?
Drink the sugar water.
We drink sugar water all the time, especially if we're diabetic. And so I did a post a long time ago. I said, we're dumber than the rats. It's incredible. Where did we lose? See, the microbes are smart. The little critters are smart. The big critters are smart. How did we lose that innate intelligence that we don't know what to eat anymore? That's what fascinates me is we've lost this wisdom that the animals on the farm have. I would venture to say even the plants are probably smarter than we are on the farm. But it's like, what happened? I don't know that there's an answer, but to me, it's fascinating that we've lost this capacity to understand and discern what's safe to eat and what's not safe to eat.
Yeah, kind of a corollary to that is if an animal eats something that doesn't agree with them, makes them ill, they'll never touch it again. They remember that forever.
Really? Well,
Yeah,
that's so cool. Yeah, that makes sense that they would have that kind of memory.
yeah.
That is very cool. How many head of cattle do you have?
We'll come through 150 to 200, maybe as many as 400 in a season.
Yep, yep.
They're not all there at once usually, but they rotate through.
That's very impressive. And how many sheep do you have?
We've got a small flock of sheep at the moment. So we've scaled back from a 150 ewe herd to now we have a small flock of just 5 and they're lambs. So
Okay,
we
very cool.
focused in to have a fiber flock that's here for our enjoyment.
And
Very
for
cool.
field trips, and we do a lot of
Yeah,
education,
yeah,
and we do a lot of education. So we keep a token amount of sheep around, like not over 20 usually,
yeah.
that any age group, even little kids, can feed with their hands and get their hands on them and love up on them and get them experienced with nature. I love that line of thinking that if we don't educate everyone, but particularly young people, about nature and why it's important, they'll never be able to take care of it. They won't have a frame of reference or a basis in reality for that to be important to them.
Some of my most favorite books were by a famous Australian animal farmer, Pat Colby. She
Yes,
spelled it. Yeah, you're familiar with her work?
yes.
I think she's such a genius, just brilliant mind with such simple thinking and rules of execution. But my favorite part of her writing was talking about sheep and why every shepherd has a black sheep. Really important because most people don't know that animals with black hair need more copper than animals that don't have black.
And most of our sheep have black hair,
Oh,
and we
really?
actually
Okay, that's so cool.
our mentor very much was like, you're going to read this in all of the books, and I want you to take it with a grain of salt because you will see the difference when your sheep do have access to copper in their wool, especially if you have the natural colored wool is also called black wool, even though it could be gray or silver, but the point is it's not white, and those are the sheep. That's what we have. Yeah,
That's so cool. No,
yeah,
that I regularly talk to people. I mean, I'll talk to strangers. I'll go up to them, and they might be from India, or they might be from Africa, or they might be from Spain, or it doesn't matter. They've got this shock of black hair. Of course, I don't have black hair, do I? And I'm like, how much more copper do you need than I do? And they're just like totally bollocks by the question. I said, okay, now that you know you need 6 times more copper, where is it in your diet? And then they get really uncomfortable because they realize they have no idea what they're eating, where the minerals are coming from. I mean, but that's the basis of your work. That's your greatest gift to your customers is you're on top of the microbes, the minerals, the need for the regenerative process to sustain that, to keep that cycle of life moving forward. I just think between us, we're doing good work. You just don't want me on your farm. That's all.
That's not
That is
true,
not
Morley.
true.
That's not true.
If you would see how easy it is to just use nature to create these things,
Yeah.
we'll move 50, 80 cows in 5, 10 minutes. We just call them and they come. They're
No way.
they're handled. They're never rough with them. With none of the cowboy hooping and hollering.
No
They
cattle
just
prods. No
no,
cattle
no,
prods.
no,
No.
no. We don't even own one.
Do you know how hard it is to find research? It doesn't come when you call. You gotta work. You gotta work to find the research. You're just calling the cow. That's not fair. That's just absolutely not fair.
Yeah, you just open the gate to the next paddock and they just flow through.
People think I just opened the gates, don't they? And the research is flowing through. Oh my gosh, I wish that were the case. No, that is amazing. We have a farmer that we get our unprocessed dairy from, and he's just the greatest guy in the world. He was a dairyman for his entire life. Then, as he approached 60, he thought, "Well, I'm going to have to phase out," and he stopped, doing the dairy. He sold his whole herd, sold all the equipment, and after 2 years, he was so lonely. He started the whole process over. Now got the same herd he had before, and it's just so much fun to talk with him. But the milk he produces, so you get a gallon, and you expect to see the cream line up here, right? His cream line is like 3/4 of the milk. It's incredible. And it's a very natural process. He doesn't get in the way of it, as you would certainly understand. And these animals are huge. I mean, to a newbie like me, I'm like, what are you doing with it? They're really big animals. And it's just, that's the love of his life, is moving those cows and getting them to produce the milk.
Nice.
So it's very cool.
Yeah.
I assume you have beef cattle? Is that what you're focusing on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we don't do any dairy. Yeah.
Do you have Black Angus?
Not solely. We're more interested in a certain phenome. There's maybe 3 to 5% of the cows in the country that are really good candidates for grass fed, grass finished. So we're looking for, although most of our cows are probably Black Angus
Cross.
or mostly Black Angus, but we've had delicious Herefords. We've, just any number of other breeds. But once you really understand what you're looking for, you can walk through a herd and spot the 5 that would be good candidates.
So
And
when
what
do
he
you know
means
Black Angus? When do you need more copper?
is it reddish coat? Their coat starts to turn reddish
On the shoulder, on the
on the
shoulder, top of
shoulder. Okay.
the
Yeah.
shoulder. As soon as there's a tuft of brown hair or rust hair, you know they need more copper. No, I mean, I'm sure they need a bunch of stuff. I'm so copper focused because I think that, as I understand it, and again, I've only done so much research, but there's a famous team in England during the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and it was McCants and Widdowson. McCants was a pediatrician, and Widdowson was a biochemist. And they did all the research in England on what nutrients the public needed in order to survive. And they're very meticulous about it. And they made the observation in 1937 that copper deficiency was the number one nutrient deficiency on the farm and hasn't changed in 80 years. It's a scary thought that the average person has no clue, but the average farmer, I'm not sure, is aware of that dynamic and how fragile the ecosystem is to a lack of copper. It just has this compound effect, as you can imagine.
What would you say the best way to introduce additional copper at the usable level to the soil would be?
Well, the way that David, my student, he sprays copper sulfate. Now there may be no. It's like that's too simple, right? And
It's most of the best ideas they're simple.
they're very simple. They're very powerful, but they're very simple. His is 10 to 15 pounds of copper sulfate per acre. That's it. Yeah.
You're the note taker, E. Make
I
sure
got
you
it.
get all this.
And I'll give you David's phone number. and make sure you have it so you can call him and just talk through it. Because
That would be great.
he's a brilliant individual, been very successful. He lives up in Northern California, up what's the Redding? He lives up near Redding, California, and has a very successful farm up there. And David Crizzo, I'll get you his phone number, and I think you guys will have a fascinating conversation.
Yeah,
He's helped a lot of people.
it'd be great.
And he's making radishes. Do you know why he makes radish?
No, I was curious. It was a curious combination.
What's one of the most powerful copper enzymes on planet Earth? Horseradish enzyme.
Huh.
And so, he sent me some of his horseradish enzyme. It'll knock you on your keister.
So we do a cover crop. If we've got a patch of ground that's thin that we want to see more plant life going on, we might cover crop it where we just broadcast a mixture of seeds, and it's got purposefully some broadleaf plants in it, and two of those are radishes and turnips that are, yeah.
Again, drawing on my years of experience as a farmer, it's a very supportive produce to regenerate the soil. I'm not sure why, but it's used quite a bit. So that would be kind of fun for you to talk to him about that.
Yeah, we've always thought about it as helping to add a lot of organic matter because we don't harvest them. They're just meant to grow. The broadleaf shades the ground so that the grasses and things can take root and have a bit of break from the heat. But then the tap root of this radish or the turnip will then compost in place and add more carbon to the soil as well. But the enzyme.
That's the fascinating part. I never give thought to the carbon side. You're really focused on carbon. I get that, but on the human side, I'm not aware. The carbon comes by way of sugars and the fats. And of course the protein's going to be more nitrogen, but the sugars and fats are going to be more carbon based. But I've never thought about the carbon content of food. That's fascinating to think about it from a farming perspective of the footprint.
It's a major food source for the microbes, and so that's the kind of the.
That's too simple.
It's the probiotic, if you will.
Prebiotic. Please make it more complicated. That was too simple.
Yeah. As I understand it, that's why
wait. That makes so much sense. So the carbon's feeding the microbes. Well, guess what? Microbes are drawn to iron, bacteria for the most part. And what do they love? They love sugar. They want simple sugar. They want simple carbon. That is so cool. I love that. Because they can't break down the carbon in the fat because it's too complicated for them. That is so This is a genius moment. This is really cool. I love this. This is fantastic.
Yeah, that's why that got discovered with the munitions. Man, that looks green. What'd we do? Oh, that's where we've been setting off a lot of product. As I understand it, chemicals are in essence put the microbe population almost like on an amphetamine. So they go into hyperdrive and really consume a lot of carbon until the carbon's gone. And that's where when you see someone work in a field and there's huge dust and all this, that is soil that doesn't have much carbon in it. It doesn't hold any water. It is just dirt. We don't cut hay anymore. We've learned our way through that. But when we cut hay, I would cut for several neighbors as well. And the tractor's got a lot of glass in the cab, and I would have to wash windows several times a day on their fields. And I could cut hay all day long on our fields and never have to wash a window. There were times on their fields I could not see the implement behind me, the mower or the baler. There was so much.
In good quality soil, you don't have this devastation of dust because the microbes are doing what? The microbes are what? Well, why don't they create dust? What is it that's different on your soil versus your neighbor's land?
Well, there's adequate carbon in the soil. That's why when we move off a pasture, there's, it may be waist high, it may be shoulder high. When we move in, it's fun to move cows, and you look out there and you can't see them, and it's like, did we move them? Yeah, they're in there, but it's over the top of them. But when we come out, there's half or more of that left, maybe, and that we want that tromped down, and that keeps it. We're constantly introducing carbon into the soil.
Right.
And it's a combination of things, Morley. Like we've got if when the soil has the carbon it needs to have a microbial community that keeps it healthy, the microbes they're creating a network amongst themselves. Mycorrhizal fungi in a sense acts as a glue. It's helping to network the soil together, but so do more plants are able to grow there, and so those roots are able to hold more soil in place, so you don't have dry dust leaving. You've got more plants to cover the bare parts of the soil so that it's not exposed, drying out and becoming dust. So it's this multifaceted system that helps keep the topsoil on the ground where it belongs, as opposed to getting lifted into the air and going away down the lane.
Is that carbon coming from the waste matter? Is that what's adding to the carbon in the soil?
It's
Not
also getting sequestered by plants from the air.
Okay, got it. Okay,
So
as part of the photosynthesis process.
yeah.
okay.
And then
Yeah,
cruder forms of carbon are just uneaten grass that gets tromped in and mulched in with the hoof action. So,
And,
so
and
it
there's
goes from everything from almost subatomic through the photosynthesis process, where it's capturing it from thin air, if you will, down to grosser forms of introduction where they're not eating a whole lot of that product, and it's just getting tromped and ground back in.
essentially composted in place.
Yeah,
exactly.
composted in place. It's really interesting. Had what I guess you'd call a drought probably 4 or 5 years ago. And it was wonderful because we got to stress test our system.
Yeah,
Everything looks good when times are good. But when you really get to stress test the system, that's when you see how you're doing. And we had, neighbors, everybody in the area, the whole state was destocking, selling cows. They were losing weight. The grasses were burned up. We gained weight clear through that process. We like to gain 2.5, 3 pounds a day. We weren't doing that, but we were gaining a pound, pound and a half, while everybody else was losing weight. Their herds were devaluing. They sell by the pound.
right, sure.
We gained weight all the way through, and you could go out and part the ground with our broadleaf, and then there'd be nice grass underneath that. Our ground temperature was 15, maybe 20 degrees even below ambient temperature. So when it's 100
Right,
3 or 4 outside, we were in the low 80s at ground temperature because we're shaded, we're holding water,
right.
and they're with the monocrop that's been fertilized every year. They're burning up. There's nothing.
So here's an important question that you may or may not know the answer to. What's the most prevalent protein on planet Earth?
Is it a goat?
Is it is it collagen?
No, no, those are great answers. And it's a protein called Rubisco. Have you ever heard of Rubisco? I
No.
never heard. I just learned this a couple weeks ago. Rubisco stands for ribo, ribosyl ribosyl diphosphate decarboxylase. So really, you got that? So it's going to be on the final, so you better make sure you got that in your notes. But its name is Rubisco, like Nabisco, and this is the enzyme. This is the most amazing thing. It's the enzyme in the plant that is splitting the carbon from the oxygen. The carbon goes into the glucose, and the oxygen goes into the air, so we can breathe, right? So we can then make energy on our side of the fence. But what is the critical mineral to make Rubisco work is called copper. And nobody knows this. It is the most, you can Google it. Google Rubisco. It's the most prevalent protein on the planet, and nobody knows this. And we're supposed to believe that copper's toxic.
He's right. I'm reading it's the most abundant enzyme on Earth, playing a crucial role in photosynthesis. It's the key enzyme responsible for carbon fixation, converting atmospheric carbon dioxide into organic molecules in
It plays
plants.
right into your
Yeah,
farming strategy. That's
yeah,
exactly what you're doing. You're doing it intuitively. I'm just being a dweeb about giving you the name of it. But it's like, I don't know, if I was running a farming school, that'd be one of the first things I teach farmers is where is this carbon and this oxygen coming from?
yeah. And so, in reading your material, your interest in copper stems from the because you're interested in in oxygenating, in taking advantage of oxygen. Our body's taking advantage of oxygen so that we can utilize the energy, really.
Well,
Is that fair?
oxygen is a poison. It's a very toxic substance. We take it for granted. We can't live without it, but you can't age without it. And what causes aging is oxidative stress that's triggered by iron that's building in our body. So, you know, Eileen, how old are you? What's your age?
3.
Okay, so multiply 365. Not in your head. Get your calculator out.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
be a minute.
yeah. Stan, what's your age?
71.
Okay, you and I are same vintage. I'm 72, but you're in great shape. And you and I both have about 27,000 milligrams of iron. Eileen has about half that much.
15,695.
Okay, that's right. And so here's the key. Eileen's body is designed for 4,000 milligrams of iron, and Stan and my body is designed for 5,000. But we have a multiple of that in our body. There's way more iron in our body than we realize. See, I'd be willing to bet dollars to donuts, Stan, that you look different today than you did when you were in high school.
I do.
Yeah, I know, right? And I do too. Yeah. And all of that change is courtesy of iron interacting with oxygen inside your body
So,
because there's not enough copper to regulate the iron and oxygen.
what's the next intelligent step to mitigate some of these actions?
Well, I think having this conversation was primo. That's great. You read the book. That's really important. But I think what it really comes down to is we've tried to simplify this process of what not to eat and what to eat, the stops and starts. And it sounds like I think if we were to compare our processes, they're not that much different. Because you're really, what I love about your approach is you're very fixated on the carbon side and making sure that you're holding those nutrients, that you're feeding them the microbiome, which is essential. Would encourage you to look into the yeast bacteria ratio, because I think as I understand it, it's supposed to be really, really important. And it's changed a lot because of commercial farming has killed the yeast. And what do yeast love? They love copper. They really love copper. And then, of course, you can get into all of the herbicides and fungicides and all the sides. Well, they're all killing copper, almost like it's planned, right? And so the thing is, you want to don't overthink it. The beauty of your farm is you've developed this very straightforward, natural process of the cycle of life. Well, there's a cycle of life that runs the body. It's just not taught to doctors. That's the key. Is you got to really stray from that allopathic model, and really, we should be spending more time with farmers than physicians. We'd be a lot.
Yeah, when we started with this ranch, it had been, I'd call it abused
Yeah, I
ranch
believe it.
traditionally. And it probably took us 2 or 3 years to really get the engine started
I
to where
believe
it
it.
was doing its thing. I mean, I noticed right off how responsive it was to any sincere effort, but it really took 2 to 3 years before it's like this thing's just, stay out of the way and don't mess anything up. This thing's rocking and rolling on its own.
And just keep moving.
Yeah, just keep supporting it.
Now, you guys are up in what, Pacific Northwest? Is that where
We are.
you're in Washington?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you made a pilgrimage to Mecca, to Polyface Farm in Virginia?
Yes. I was wondering. I was waiting with
I
bated
know,
breath.
right?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, Stan mentioned when we really pivoted to trying to raise proteins in the backyard, it was because we read Omnivore's Dilemma, and Joel Salatin is featured in Omnivore's
oh yeah.
Dilemma. Yeah. Yeah.
I was very active in the Weston A. Price movement, and at one
Yeah.
point was able to. I was lobbying congressmen about food, like I knew what I was talking about, right? But who I was teamed up with was Joel Salatin. It was an absolute hoot. I mean, I knew who he was. I'd read his books and stuff. But at the end of the day, I said, I just have a favor. He said, what's that? I said, you gotta write, you gotta autograph this piece of paper for my wife. And he said, sure, I'm happy to do it. I said, no, but you can't just say that. You can't just be your name. I said, the pigginess of the pig. And
Yeah,
he got a big grin on his face. He said, sure. So that's framed in our home.
Awesome.
nice.
So
But
it's
yeah,
just,
to
again,
push that point a little bit, it was basic education
yeah,
at simple levels that inspired us and drove us forward. And there's a lot of good material out there with Salatin, Gabe Brown,
yes, Gabe Brown,
a number
absolutely.
of other people that are kind of on the leading edge of this, and they have some great material out there. And it's hard to educate yourself and not change your ways.
No, it's very, very difficult. But once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. But I guess one of the questions I would have for you both is what would be the most important thing you would recommend to a farmer to improve the quality of their work? And what would be the most important thing you would recommend to a customer in terms of their selecting their food? What would be the two sides of the recommendations that you would have for farmers and the public?
Well, the customer part's easy.
Find a
The
good farmer.
farmer one's kind of a trick question because most people aren't interested in doing this method.
No, I know
You
that.
know,
I
and
know.
the universities are geared very much to the conventional
It's all,
systems
it's all big
that
money.
are
I know.
that are highly supportive of better life through chemistry, commercial chemistry. So the farmer one's a little harder. But I think that if they would educate themselves, particularly with some of Gabe Brown's stuff, where
Yes.
he's taken a big
Right.
system that was conventional and converted it over and can prove with hardcore numbers that he's outproducing yield wise his conventional neighbors. So if they would study that and be realistic, it's not going to happen the first year. It's a process, but you start the conversion and you will get there if you start. Customer side is educate yourself, know your farmer, understand you're making an investment in your long term health, and really it's a gift you give yourself in terms of longevity, health, your genetics, whatever they are, to express at their highest potential, acumen wise and health, and physically. It's really an investment in your long term health,
Years. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
and you're not giving up anything flavor wise. The eating experience is what you're doing now and much more. If you're really eating properly raised chickens and properly raised beef and pigs and lambs and bison, you won't go back.
No, that's very true. And many years ago, Dr. Liz and I were at a farmer's market down in Louisiana, and there was this big throng of people buying eggs from this farmer who said he had fresh eggs. And I was like, fresh is not quite good enough. So I decided to scratch the record a little bit. I said, I'm just curious, what are you feeding the chickens? He knew exactly where I was going. He said, well, I'm feeding them cracked corn. I said, great. I said, where are you getting this cracked corn? And he said, from the feed store. I said, wonderful. Where's the feed store getting this cracked corn? He said, from a supplier. He was doing everything he could to avoid where he knew this conversation was going. And I said, I'm just curious, where's the supplier getting this cracked corn? And he said, from the field. I said, really? What are they spraying on that field? And that's when people, all the light bulbs went off and people realized where I was going, and the crowd dissipated. He lost all of his business. But people don't know what's going on in the system. They don't realize that, as you alluded to, Stan, or you were not even subtle about it. The system is so stacked against us economically. It's just hard to get the farmer to take the steps to really harness themselves to what it takes to develop natural food as opposed to this processed food, even though it's not. That's the part that's so tragic is people don't realize that there's that big a difference between the two forms of farming, commercial and regenerative.
Yeah, it's huge. We know people that have eliminated 500,000, $1 million worth of inputs. And that means chemicals. As they've transitioned, they're like, they can't believe how much money they used to spend on inputs.
I believe it.
All of our stuff obviously is non GMO, no corn, no soy,
Sure.
No, nothing sprayed with Roundup, the hay or anything. I'd like Eileen to answer the same question.
Yeah.
What's the
I think
advice
good.
to the farmer and to the
I think that'd
consumer?
be great.
Well, to the customer is that it is go as much as possible, go to the source.
That's
Because,
true.
we as consumers in the US, we go into a grocery store and we do the best we can. We try to pick the label that is the least offensive, that sounds like it has the most nutrition, that sounds like it's the best for our bodies and for the planet. But at that point, it's all marketing. And to step away from the aisle and go straight to a farmer's market, purchase from someone that is raising the food, who's saying, this is how we're doing it. Look into our world, whether it's whether you can actually physically go visit that farm or go see that legitimately on their social media they're pulling back the curtain and going, this is how the animals live.
That's right.
It's that step that really informs the consumer, and the consumer has the power. That's the thing, is if the power is in our purchases. And when we say it's more valuable to me to pay a little more for food that's been raised on living soil, for animals that have lived outside in breathing fresh air and exposing their skin to sunshine with their hooves on the soil, that's huge. And the market will respond. There will become more opportunities and more availability to us if we demand it. So that's my recommendation to customers is to, however much as possible. And it's a challenge. You do have to go do your homework and you have to make an effort. But once you do, the reward's huge. I mean, the farmers markets are great, and you find that network of people, and then suddenly that's what people are spiraling each other upward for better quality, better health, better living, like just a better quality of life all around.
But again, it comes a lot of it comes back to education. If people really understood the subtherapeutic antibiotics that are introduced, the look into what Roundup really does, and understand that it survives till it gets to you. It's still, you're eating it
Yeah.
No
if
kidding.
it's on the plants. If people were educated in these processes and looked at what's really happening, not a lot of people would feed that to themselves, and certainly not to their children and so forth. They would stop. Yeah.
Are you all familiar with Don Huber's work from Purdue University as it relates to the speed with which glyphosate chelates minerals out of the soil?
No.
You guys are sitting down, right? If you've got a seatbelt, you might want to put it on. But he's put it into a logarithmic scale. So, they measure earthquakes in a logarithmic scale. So an earthquake of 3, dishes rattle, but no one gets hurt. Earthquake of 12, no one survives because it's orders of magnitude. Glyphosate was originally developed as a mineral chelator. It was a pipe cleaner, an industrial pipe cleaner. That's how it got its patent. No, it's insane. And there was at some point someone noticed that the runoff from the glyphosate that was keeping the pipe clean, there was no vegetation on the outside of the building. So, oh wow, we've got an herbicide here. And so Don Huber, he's now professor emeritus, he's retired, but he's still very active in his research. It chelates magnesium and calcium at a 3. It chelates zinc and iron at a 9, and it chelates copper at a 12. So what does that mean? It means that glyphosate is chelating copper 1,000,000,000 times faster than calcium or magnesium. And it means it's chelating copper 1,000 times faster than iron or zinc. Now here's the problem. As a friend of mine continues to tell me, he said, Morley, you've got to stop using these big numbers. He said, there are only 3 numbers in the world. There's 1, 2, and a lot. And when I start talking about 1,000,000 times or 1,000,000,000 times faster or 1,000 times faster, we can't relate to that, right? And so many years ago, I could run an 8-minute mile, which was not fast, but it was pretty good for an old man. I was in my 50s, but I could run an 8-minute mile. But at that same time, my 20-year-old son was in college, and he ran a mile in 4:02. Pretty fast, right? So I called him up and I said, "You're going to go for it?" He said, "No." He said, I'd have to work for 6 months and I wouldn't even know if I could shave those 2 seconds off. But his old man wasn't smart enough to know that. So I went to the gym to see what a 4-minute mile felt like. That was twice as fast. I almost killed myself. And I'm holding on for dear life as the treadmill's going like this. And I'm just like, trying to hold on. And I went, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture. But that's twice as fast. Okay? So when I was little, a guy named Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier, right? Well, that was 10 times the speed limit. Okay, that's pretty cool. I'm going 750 miles an hour, and that's 10 times the speed limit. We haven't gotten to 1,000 yet, have we? We haven't gotten to 1 billion. It's like, I don't think people realize, farmers or their customers realize the orders of magnitude that we're involved with in this one chemical. And what I've been told is it's the 9th most toxic chemical on the farm. And I'm like, I don't want to know what the other 8 are. That's a scary thought. But it's not that it's just bad. It's not that it's fast. It has a priority focus on copper. And then let's go back to our discussion about Rubisco. Walk me through how glyphosate and Rubisco line up. They don't make any sense at all. It's just like we are in a crash course for life on this planet. It's mind-boggling. And what's really gratifying is to have folks like yourself so devoted to this natural process of feeding people. That's God's work. You're doing amazing work. And I can spew off the statistics and the research, but you're making it happen. You're putting food on the table, which is amazing. And I'm just trying to make sure people know what's the right food, what's the right focus. And that's where I think we intersect in terms of what we do.
See, Morley, we do need you on the farm.
Yeah, I know, right? But not with gloves on.
We have 2 farm tours this weekend. Can you make it?
Yeah, can you come
I
on?
would love to come out. That would actually, we might do something later this summer. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You're so invited.
It's awesome. We have from little kids, like 2nd and 3rd graders, up to nutritional medicine people that bring a lot of clients. And it's incredible the caliber of questions that every group asks. Even the little kids, they're different than adult questions, but they are engaged and they're lunging at this information and ask. I'm always impressed by how good the questions are to those kids. And then there's 6th graders, and then there's seniors. And they want to know this stuff. It is fun to teach those little people.
Well,
And it's fun to teach the adults too.
Yeah, but they're still curious at that age.
Yeah.
See, within the RCP, we spell curious differently. It's C-RIOUS. So you can see the symbol for copper. I have a feeling this is just the start of a conversation, that I think this is a very natural intersection of and commitment, philosophy, facts and figures. Because I know I'm still trying to process your comments, Stan, about a handful of soil. My mind is going like this the whole time we've been talking, trying to process. So why are we what's the procedure where they take someone else's poop and put it in a human? Why don't they just have us eat dirt? Seriously, why? I was like, this is, and the fact that all your sheep are black, I think that alone, that would be worth it for me to fly out just to see that. Because I'm the proverbial black sheep of the community.
Well, we virtually never get sick. If we get a cold every 10 years, it's like, what the heck's going on? But I'm sure some of that is what's going on. Oh, I'm out of hands. Stick that in your mouth, like. Oh.
Exactly. Absolutely. No. I guess, I think we're coming up on the hour, which is, it flew by. And that's why I think we'll have to continue this dialogue. But I guess what I would ask is, what's the question you had hoped I would ask, but didn't get to? What's something you really want the viewer to know about your farm, your philosophy, your commitment to helping feed people. I would really love to know what is it that makes you guys tick?
Well, so it looks like you're nudging me, Stan. Honestly, I didn't finish answering the question about what would I advise other farmers. And I think actually this answer is the same as what you're asking, is that a huge part of our model for regenerative agriculture, where we're helping the land get healthier over time, is that we allow it to rest. So the animals eat a particular piece of pasture, particular ground. We organize it so that they're on a particular spot with portable electric fencing. And like Stan was saying, we open the gate, call them to the new pasture, they get a new fresh paddock for that day. But the ground behind them gets to rest.
Sure.
And so the grass gets to rest and regrow, and the blades of grass or the soil collectors, those elongate and are allowed to now capture more energy, which transfers that energy to the roots, to the soil, to the microbes, and it's allowed to its process of regeneration, and that's huge, and that's what doesn't happen on conventional pastures with animal husbandry, where you just throw the whole herd out and those animals eat and eat and eat until there's not much left, and then they
Exactly.
that's not the way nature wants us to do it. Nature wants the animals to take the first most nutritious bite and then move on so that they can go find the next most nutritious bite and let that plant regrow, regenerate, and become the next nutritious bite. Yeah.
Yeah, when you study the prairies that they tilled up
Yeah.
originally,
Yeah.
roots 5, 6, 7 feet long. Now
Really?
roots are 3 and 4 inches long in conventional methods, and you're going for that. It's just it's a different world.
Think of the minerals that you can get with 4 or 5 feet, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that makes so much sense. And again, it's not part of our lexicon. I was a biology major in college. I don't remember talking about minerals at all. I wasn't the best student in school, but I have a pretty good recall of subject matter. And I don't remember any conversation about minerals in any meaningful way, whether it's about farming or food or humans or any kind of life form. And it's like, that's what makes us tick.
Do you know the authors Montgomery? Let's see. Oh gosh, his first name's escaping me. Montgomery and his wife Anne Bickley.
No, I don't know that.
So they've written many good books. One of three that they call the Dirt trilogy. That
Oh God, that's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. David Montgomery, it just came to me. David Montgomery and Anne Bickley. But one of those books in that trilogy is The Hidden Half of Nature. And it's a wonderful book. They're husband and wife, but he's a geologist and she's a biologist. And they say that their two disciplines, their specialties, meet in the soil, because it's the rocks and the minerals mixed with the life and the biology that is who we are, and what, it's a great come from, and they're all of their books are tremendously insightful, and they're fun reads. So I recommend that.
I'm going to blame you for recommending those books because I read everything that Pat Colby had to write. I was just
Yeah.
consumed by her thinking, and now I'm going to get into the Dirt trilogy.
Yeah.
And humanity's just going to have to wait. I'm going to take her for
It will.
No, it's great. No, I appreciate the recommendation. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think I might have a link for a free copy of Soil Grass Cancer. And if I do have that, I'll make sure we send it to you
Oh,
because
I'd love it.
it will change your life. It will reinforce everything you know, but you're looking at it from a biochemist perspective who loves to be a dairyman.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's a really cool book. And what I really should do is make a photocopy of the copy I did with all my notes in it.
Oh, cool.
That would actually probably be easier for me to do that. The guy that you met, Steve Gant, he has a PhD in informatics and library science.
Oh, wow.
And he saw me, like my papers always have these notes all over them. I mean,
Sounds like our desks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That looks familiar.
yeah, right. So he's looking at me. He's looking at me at Starbucks. He's like, "Do you realize what this is?" I said, "No, it's a scribble." He said, "No, it's marginalia." He said, "It's worth a lot of money." Well, maybe someday, but not anytime soon. But no, I'll see if I can't make a copy of my version of soil gas cancer. And you'll get both Andre Voisin and Morley Robbins, and you're going to get a real kick out of that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you.
But we will definitely continue this dialogue. I appreciate you taking the time tonight, and thank you for a wonderful conversation. You guys were great. I really enjoyed it. Give us contact information for your farm, where people can contact you,
Sure.
and that'd be wonderful for people.
You can find our farm online at ramsteadranch.com, RAM as in Mary, STEAD ranch.com.
Okay.
And we're on major social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We have a YouTube channel, all of the above.
Weekly newsletter that includes a lot of ranch pictures and here's what's going on.
Yeah. We're big on we're big on sharing recipes and
Yeah,
how to
a
cook
lot of
pasture
recipes.
raised and grass fed meats. Yep, it's all 100% grass fed and grass finished and pasture raised.
And I'm just be curious, who you've mentioned Gabe Brown, you've mentioned Joel Shalaton. Who are some other farmers that you really have enjoyed learning from and getting to know, so that people know what the spectrum of influence that you've had?
Well, Jim Garish was instrumental in teaching us a lot about pastures and ground health.
And it sounds
Uh,
like you guys are teachers yourselves. Like you're in the educational domain as well, which is very important.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Go ahead. E.
Yeah, I was going to say Fred Provenza is another one. He's actually, I believe he's a vet, but he's done a lot of research and teaching about that intrinsic intelligence of animals where they're still tied to the flavor of nutrition. And he's done studies with sheep and has a really great book out, a couple of books about that. It's sort of listening to the animals. They know what they're doing. Um,
That's fascinating. And
yeah,
now, whenever I'm on a podcast, people ask how to contact me. I always give out my email address and my cell phone, and the host always freaks out. Dude, do you really want to do that? I do it all the time. Not that I'm trying to force you into it, but I think that people can contact you through social media.
absolutely. Yeah, and or they can contact us right through their website. We actually do respond to those emails. Phone number is 509-442-4725. And so pick up the phone. We're all humans here and we answer.
Well, it's really fun to have this kind of exchange, and I really appreciate your commitment, your philosophy, your follow through. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the recording, and then we'll just make sure we're still in touch with what we're going to do next.